Zheng He, the Chinese admiral who could have colonized the world. In the summer of 1421, the harbor at Nanjing disappeared beneath a forest of masts. Thousands of men shouted across the water while drums rolled through the morning mist. Sailors hauled silk sails as wide as palace walls. Horses screamed inside wooden transports. Bronze cannons glimmered beside crates filled with porcelain, tea, and silver. At the center of it all stood a towering admiral in dark robes, watching the river with complete silence. His fleet stretched so far across the Yangtze that witnesses claimed it looked like a floating city. Ahead of him lay the Indian Ocean, Arabia, East Africa, and seas no Chinese fleet had ever ruled with such power before. Behind him stood the richest empire on earth, a dynasty determined to show the world that heaven itself favored China. And yet the strangest part of that morning was not the size of the expedition. It was the fact that, within a generation, almost every trace of it would be destroyed. The popular image of Zheng He often reduced him to a peaceful explorer, a Chinese sailor who visited distant lands before quietly fading into history. Some even described him as a harmless diplomat carrying gifts across the ocean. But that version hid the true scale of what happened. Zheng He did not command a few adventurous ships. He commanded the largest naval force the world had ever seen before the modern age. He sailed with armies, interpreters, engineers, doctors, and treasure-worth kingdoms. In several ports, kings bowed before him. In others, he used violence without hesitation. Most people also never learned three remarkable truths. First, Zheng He was born a Muslim child in Western China before becoming the servant of an emperor. Second, his voyages reached East Africa decades before European powers entered those waters in force. And third, his fleet was so powerful that some historians believe China briefly stood closer to global naval dominance than any civilization before the Age of Empire. So why did it stop? Why did the greatest fleet on Earth vanish almost overnight, while far smaller European kingdoms eventually crossed the oceans and reshaped the world? At the beginning of the 15th century, the Ming Dynasty stood at the height of its strength. China possessed enormous cities, advanced agriculture, and a bureaucracy so complex that officials spent years studying philosophy merely to enter government service. In Europe, many kingdoms still struggled with famine, disease, and internal war. By comparison, Ming China resembled a giant illuminated against a dark horizon. The emperor ruled as the son of heaven, believed to govern with divine approval. Order mattered above all things. Every ceremony, every rank, every movement inside the imperial court reflected a universe arranged in perfect balance. Yet beneath that image of harmony lay fear. The Ming Dynasty had risen after overthrowing the Mongol Yuan rulers. Memories of foreign conquest still haunted the empire. Northern borders remained dangerous. Court factions fought constantly for influence. Even inside the Forbidden City, survival depended on political skill as much as loyalty. Ordinary life could be brutal. Floods destroyed villages. Bandits crossed rural roads. A farmer might work his entire life yet never travel farther than the nearest market town. The sea itself was often viewed with suspicion. Merchants grew wealthy through trade, but Confucian scholars frequently distrusted commerce, believing true stability came from agriculture and tradition. And then there was the boy who would become Zheng He. He had been born in Yunnan around 1371 into a Muslim family connected to the old Mongol administration. His original name was Ma He. When Ming armies conquered the region, his world collapsed. His father died during the fighting. The child was captured, castrated, and sent into imperial service as a eunuch. One violent campaign erased his old life forever. Yet that same catastrophe placed him near the center of power. Unlike many court officials, Zheng He grew up amid military camps and frontier warfare. He learned endurance early. He also formed a close bond with Prince Zhu Di, the future Yongle emperor. Together they survived rebellion, political struggle, and civil war. Most listeners imagined imperial China as closed and isolated. In truth, the Indian Ocean already formed a vast international highway linking Africa, Arabia, India, and Southeast Asia through trade. Muslim merchants crossed these waters constantly. Chinese goods traveled thousands of miles before European sailors even understood the full shape of the ocean routes. And one man intended to dominate them all. When Zhu Di seized the throne in 1402 after a bloody civil war, he needed legitimacy. He needed the world to recognize his authority. Zheng He became the instrument of that ambition. The first test came quickly. In 1405, Zheng He received command of an expedition unlike anything in recorded history. Some ships reportedly measured more than 120 meters long, though historians still debated the exact size. Even the conservative estimates remained astonishing. The fleet carried perhaps 27,000 men. No European kingdom of the age could have assembled anything close. As the fleet moved south through Southeast Asia, Zheng He demonstrated that these voyages were not simple trade missions. Pirates attacked near Palembang. Zheng He hunted them down, destroyed their forces, and brought their leader back to China in chains. That was the first warning. The Admiral smiled through diplomacy, but power traveled behind every gift. Yet his greatest obstacle did not come from the sea. It came from the imperial court itself. Conservative Confucian officials viewed the expeditions as wasteful spectacles. They believed China already possessed everything it needed. Why spend fortunes sailing across dangerous oceans merely to impress foreign rulers? The conflict cut to the heart of Chinese civilization. Should the empire look outward toward expansion and maritime power, or inward toward stability and tradition? The tension followed Zheng He through every voyage. Then came the turning point. During later expeditions, Zheng He crossed the Indian Ocean and reached the Swahili coast of East Africa. Chinese sailors encountered giraffes, zebras, ivory traders, and cities tied into global commerce. One giraffe brought back to China caused amazement at court. Some believed the animal resembled the mythical Qilin, a creature said to appear during the reign of a wise ruler. For a moment, the world itself seemed to confirm Yonggle's greatness. An inscription from Zheng He later declared, "We have traversed more than 100,000 li of immense water spaces." The statement was not boasting. It was calculation. He understood exactly what he had achieved. And still the deeper question remained. If China could project power this far in the early 15th century, what might have happened had the voyages continued for another century? At the height of his influence, Zheng He commanded 7 massive expeditions across nearly 3 decades. His fleets visited dozens of kingdoms. Diplomats returned with tribute missions from distant courts. Chinese prestige spread across the Indian Ocean like a rising tide. No previous Chinese admiral had operated on such scale. The fleets carried silk, porcelain, copper coins, and imperial decrees. But they also carried soldiers. In Sri Lanka, Zheng He intervened in a political conflict and captured a hostile ruler. In Sumatra, he crushed rival factions threatening trade routes. His voyages mixed diplomacy with intimidation in equal measure. This was not exploration for curiosity alone. It was the performance of empire, and the cost was enormous. Shipyards consumed forests. Tens of thousands of laborers worked under crushing pressure. Court rivals grew increasingly hostile. Many officials feared the expedition strengthened eunuchs like Zheng He at the expense of scholar bureaucrats. Then the hinge appeared. The Yongle emperor died in 1424. Everything changed after that moment. His successors showed less enthusiasm for the voyages. Northern threats from Mongol forces demanded attention and money. Confucian officials argued that defending the land mattered more than ruling the sea. Gradually, the expeditions slowed. The greatest navy on Earth began to retreat from the horizon. By the time Zheng He sailed on his final voyage in the 1430s, he was already an old man. Some accounts suggested he died during the expedition and was buried at sea. Others claimed his body returned to China. The uncertainty itself felt strangely fitting. A man who crossed half the known world disappeared into legend, and afterward, silence spread. Records vanished. Shipyards declined. Large-scale ocean expeditions were restricted. In later generations, some officials even attempted to erase memories of the voyages entirely, seeing them as expensive distractions from proper governance. The harbor that once thundered with imperial ambition fell quiet. In the end, the answer to the documentary's central question lay not in weakness, but in choice. China did not fail to reach global dominance because it lacked technology, wealth, or naval skill. For a brief period, it possessed all three. The Ming court simply decided that the ocean no longer mattered enough to justify the cost. Europe would make the opposite decision. That was the great divergence. The irony would have haunted Zheng He himself. A child captured by war rose to command the largest fleet on Earth, only to watch the vision behind it fade almost immediately after its greatest triumph. The beginning already contained the ending. His voyages had always depended on the will of one emperor. Once that will disappeared, the tide turned with it. Yet Zheng He's legacy never truly vanished. His expeditions strengthened trade networks across Asia and the Indian Ocean. Chinese communities expanded through maritime exchange. Diplomatic connections reached farther than many modern listeners realized possible for the 15th century. Maps, navigation techniques, and cultural knowledge moved across continents because of those voyages. History also judged him unfairly in another way. For centuries, European exploration dominated global historical memory, while Zheng He became a footnote outside China. Yet decades before Portuguese caravels rounded Africa, Ming fleets already sailed those waters with astonishing confidence. The world that later emerged from oceanic trade might have looked profoundly different had Ming China continued investing in naval expansion. Perhaps the modern age would have spoken more Chinese words. Perhaps global commerce would have formed around different centers of power. Perhaps the balance between land empires and sea empires would have shifted entirely. No one could know for certain, but this much remained undeniable. Zheng He stood at one of the great crossroads of human history. Few individuals ever carried the possibilities of civilization so directly in their hands, and fewer still watched those possibilities disappear so completely. So the final question remained open. Was Zheng He proof that China missed its chance to shape the modern world through the sea? Or did the Ming emperors wisely avoid the endless violence and conquest that later followed global empire? History never settled that argument completely. But somewhere beneath the waters of the Indian Ocean, where his final voyage may have ended, the silence still carried the memory of a fleet so vast that entire kingdoms once stopped and stared as it passed beyond the horizon. For those drawn to the forgotten turning points of civilization, the moments when history might have become something entirely different,